I remember when I first really learned about the horror of slavery, the way that a person's entire life was simply stolen from them. And while we all grew up learning about this unfortunate reality, we often think of it as something that belongs in the past. Surely, in the land of the free and the 21st century, slavery has no place. However, today I'm going to inform you about the way that slavery has existed to the modern day and how we can eliminate it forever. For those of you who have never heard of this, I encourage you to listen and to learn about the reality and gravity of this situation. For those of you who know a lot about it, I'd encourage you to go from knowing a lot to doing a lot, in accordance to some of the resources I'll be providing at the end of this speech. Now, I did my own personal research for this by going to organizations like the UN, like the International Labor Organization, and like the Idaho Anti-Trafficking Coalition. But I also partnered with a local man who has devoted his life to fighting human trafficking. His name's Kenny Sacked, and he's the president of an organization called Wipe Every Tear, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. But suffice to say, he has devoted his life to rescuing as many people from the sex trade as humanly possible. Now, I'd like to examine this problem through three different points of view. The first is the problem worldwide, the second is the problem here in the United States, and the third is what we can do about it. Now, worldwide, the definition of slavery is, quote, all work or service which is exacted from any person under the threat of a penalty and for which the person has not offered himself or herself voluntarily, unquote. This definition comes to us from the International Labor Organization in their Forced Labor Convention of 1930. Now, 2 years ago, the International Labor Organization published their global estimates of modern slavery. We can see the findings of that research broken down right here. And what we can see is that over 40 million individuals are currently trapped in modern day slavery. Of those 40 million, 25% of them are children, 71% of them are female. And slavery takes many forms, from forced sexual labor to forced marriage to forced physical labor to state-sponsored forced labor as well. Now, it may be easy to think of modern slavery as something that happens out there, far away in the third world or undeveloped nations, but surely not here in the land of the free. But the unfortunate truth is that that is simply not the case. According to the Global Slavery Index in 2016, around 57,000 people were trafficked in the United States that year. And Idaho in 2019, according to the Idaho Anti-Trafficking Coalition, has already had 8 real cases of sex trafficking happen here in this state, in our own backyard. Now, sex trafficking especially usually happens in conjunction with large events. The Super Bowl, for instance, is typically the day that they see the highest amount of sex trafficking in the United States. And in 2014, 68 individuals of sex trafficking were rescued during the Super Bowl, and 600 individuals were arrested. But it is also a disturbingly modern or a disturbingly everyday situation that happens as well. Traveling professionals especially make up a large demographic of the people who are involved in human trafficking, people like traveling salesmen or truck drivers. And what we can see here is a breakdown of modern slavery in the United States. Now, we can see that the vast majority is definitely forced prostitution, but there are more avenues of modern slavery as well. You have things like forced domestic services, forced agricultural services, factory work, as well as miscellaneous. Now, it may seem impolite to talk about slavery. It may seem impossible to affect it, but the reality is that human trafficking and sexual slavery specifically is a real problem in our world today. And the good news is that it is not hopeless. There are some great organizations that work tirelessly to end all modern-day slavery, and it is very easy to get involved. Now, the first organization that I mentioned a moment ago is Wipe Every Tear, that's led by Kenny Sacked. Now, Wipe Every Tear focuses specifically on the Philippines, rescuing anyone in need of rescue, and then putting them back through school to make sure that they never have to go back to the life that they were taken out of. You can learn a lot about them by going to their website, wipeeverytear.org. But I'd like to talk about the Philippines really quick and some of the work that they do. See, according to a fact sheet by the Canadian Broadcasting Company, there were over 375,000 women and girls involved in the sex trade in the Philippines in 2007, and that number has only gone up. Now, the average age of an individual trapped in the sex trade is between 15 and 20 years old, but some victims are as young as 11 years old. There are many different ways that an individual gets trapped in this, but one of the most common is something they call debt bondage. For instance, you have the story of Gurlia. Gurlia was a mother of three with no higher education degree. And in the Philippines, it's very hard to work and make enough money in order to feed four mouths without a higher education degree. And so when she got a notice about a nearby job for a waitress, she had to jump at it. And she was practically guaranteed the job by her potential employers, but she had to travel quite a distance to get there, actually. And so she ended up borrowing $100 in order to make the trip. Now, once she got there, she was told that the waitress job was no longer available, but she owed them money. This is, like I said, debt bondage, and it is one of the more common forms of what happens. She was given a bikini and told to stand on stage and dance until a man came by and she could start working to pay off her debt. Now, organizations like Wipe Every Tear, what they do is they send back into these places, the bars and the brothels, the girls that they pulled out. And these girls go to other individuals who are trapped and they say, let us get you out of here. Let us put you through college at no cost to yourself. Let us pay off your debt and let us stop this from happening. Thankfully for Gurlia, it only took her 4 days to be found by an individual of Wipe Every Tear. And when she was rescued, she was able to go back to being a mother of three and go back to school as well in order to provide for them. Now, you have some other great organizations as well. You have the International Justice Mission, which is a worldwide organization that does a lot of good in a lot of different countries. But I'd like to talk really quick as well about the Idaho Anti-Trafficking Coalition and about the one step that everyone, you and I, and everyone you know can do and take to stop modern-day slavery. And I'd like you to take it right now, if that's okay. I'd like you to pull out your phone and to create a new contact that is called the Idaho Anti-Trafficking Coalition. I'd like you to type in the phone number 208-649-1580. If you see an individual who seems to be in distress, a young girl especially, this usually happens in convenience stores, in hotels, or especially like big shopping areas. If you see a young girl or an older lady who seems malnourished, who seems physically injured, maybe has some sort of an identifying mark or a specific tattoo, and she seems afraid of the person that she's with, or just afraid in general, I'd recommend that you call this number. I'd ask you and plead you to call this number to give them as much information as you can. Worst case scenario, you make a false call. No one's going to get mad at you if it doesn't turn out to be an actual victim. But if it is, then you can personally save somebody from a lifetime of slavery. So again, that number is 208-649-1580 for the Idaho Anti-Trafficking Coalition. Now, as we've seen, slavery is not a thing of the past. Both internationally as well as right here down the proverbial street, slavery by way of forced labor and sexual slavery is alive and well, but it doesn't have any right to be. When I think of slavery, the biggest thing that gets me is the way that a person's entire life is taken from them, and one would not be foolish to think, why even be alive if they have nothing to look forward to but misery and abuse? But the good news is, through the work of many great organizations, which can always use more help and assistance, those lives can be reclaimed. So often, we like to think that if we lived in unjust times, we would do just things. If we lived in the era of slavery, we would be involved in the Underground Railroad. We would be abolitionists. We would be viciously fighting for the freedom of the downtrodden and the oppressed. And this is your opportunity to prove yourself right about that or wrong about that. Thank you so much for listening.